Hello. Today we will address a wide variety of topics related to the toddler and preschooler. Let's begin. This information that we're going to start off with is in chapters 11 and 12. So, growth and development for the toddler and preschooler beginning at age 15 months. Physically, they have a steady growth in height and weight. Head circumference is about 48 centimeters. Their weight is roughly 24 pounds, um, and their height is roughly 31 inches. Gross motor, they walk without help, usually since about 13 months of age. They can creep upstairs, they kneel without support, they can assume a standing position without support. Fine motor, they're constantly casting objects to the floor. They can build a tower of 2 cubes. They can hold 2 cubes in one hand. They can release a pellet into a narrow neck bottle, and they do scribble spontaneously. Sensory, they're able to identify geometric forms, place round objects into appropriate holes. And please note that binocular vision is pretty well established at this point. They will display an intense and prolonged interest in pictures. Vocalizations, they do use expressive jargon. They will say 4 to 6 words, including names. They ask for things by pointing to objects. They understand simple commands. They may actually shake their head no, even if they're agreeing to the request. Socialization, they'll tolerate some separation from the parent. They're less likely to fear strangers, and they actually are starting to imitate their parents, such as cleaning the house, folding clothes, and things of that nature. They will feed themselves using a covered cup with little spilling. They may no longer need the bottle, and they can feed themselves with a spoon, but they will rotate the spoon near the mouth, which means the food may fall on them. They will kiss and hug their parents. They may actually kiss pictures in a book, and they are having temper tantrums. 18 months. Physical, here they will develop something called physiologic anorexia, and this is from decreased growth needs. The anterior fontanelle now should be closed, and physiologically, they are able to control their sphincters. Gross motor, they run clumsily, they fall often, they can walk upstairs with one hand held. They do use pull and push toys. They can jump in one place with both feet. They can seat themselves on a chair. They can actually throw a ball overhand without falling. They will build a tower of 3 to 4 cubes. This is in fine motor. They can reach well developed, and they have something called prehension and release. So they can do all these things now. They can turn 2 pages in a book or 3 pages at a time. And this shows that fine motor of the fingers. In drawing, they can make strokes imitatively, and they can now manage a spoon without rotating it. Sensory, they can say 10 or more words. They can point to a common object such as a shoe or ball and 2 or 3 body parts. Socialization, they are the great imitators. So they like to do domestic mimicry. They can manage a spoon well. They can take off gloves, socks, shoes, and unzip their clothes. Temper tantrums are much more evident at this point, and they are beginning to have an awareness of my stuff. So ownership, this is my toy. So don't be surprised by that. They also can develop a dependency on transitional objects. And this is a fancy way of saying like a security blanket or a security doll or toy. 24 months. This is where you're going to see the chest circumference exceeding the head circumference. Prior to this, the chest circumference was a little bit smaller than the head circumference. Usual gain in height is anywhere from 4 to 5 inches. Usual gain in weight is anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds. Adult height is approximately double the height at 2 years of age. So if you measure a child at 2 years of age, their height as an adult will be twice that. They may have achieved readiness for beginning daytime control of the bowel and bladder, and they have about 16 primary teeth. Gross motor, they can go up and down stairs alone with 2 feet on each step. They run fairly well with the wide stance. They can pick up objects without falling. They will kick a ball forward without overbalancing. Fine motor, they can build a tower of 6 to 7 cubes. They can align 2 cubes or more cubes like a train. They can turn the pages of a book. Now it's 1 page at a time. They may be able to imitate vertical and circular strokes. They can turn doorknobs and unscrew lids. And this is obviously a dangerous thing now. So this is something that we need to be very cautious with in terms of child safety. Sensory accommodation. This is well developed in geometric discrimination. They're able to insert square blocks into an oblong space. Vocalization, they have a vocabulary of about 300 words. They use 2 to 3 word phrases. They use pronouns such as I, me, you. They understand directional commands. They may give you their first name. They will refer to themselves by their name. They'll verbalize their need for toileting, food, or drinks, and they talk incessantly. Socialization. Typically here we're going to see parallel play. They do have a little more sustained attention span. Temper tantrums, although still present, are starting to decrease. They will pull people to show them something. They're beginning to develop a little bit of increased independence from the mother, and they can dress themselves in very simple clothing. 30 months. Physical, the birth weight has quadrupled. Primary dentition, which is about 20 teeth, has completed. They may have daytime bowel and bladder control. Gross motor, they can jump with both feet. They can jump from a chair or a step. They can stand on 1 foot momentarily, and they can take a few steps on tippy toe. Fine motor, they can build a tower of 8 cubes. They also will now add a chimney to a train of cubes. They have good hand-finger coordination. They can hold a crayon with fingers rather than a fist. They can move fingers independently. In drawing, they will imitate vertical and horizontal strokes. They can make 2 or more strokes for a cross. Sensory, they will give first and last names, and they will refer to themselves as by the appropriate pronoun. They will use plurals, and they may name 1 color. Socialization. Here they're separating more easily from their mother. In play, they can help to put things away. They can carry breakable objects. They push with relatively good steering. They are beginning to notice sex differences. They know their own sex. And they may attend to toileting needs without help, with the exception for wiping. Age 3. Here they're going to gain anywhere 4 to 6 pounds. Usual height gain roughly 3 inches. And here they may have actually achieved nighttime control of bowel and bladder. That doesn't mean that they don't still have that occasional accident. Gross motor, here they might be able to ride a tricycle, jump off a bottom step, stand on 1 foot for a few seconds. They can go upstairs using alternate feet, but may still require both feet when they are coming down the steps. They can jump broadly. They may try to dance, but their balance might not be adequate. Fine motor, they can build a tower of 9 to 10 cubes. They can build a bridge with 3 cubes. They adeptly place small pellets in a narrow neck bottle. They can copy a circle and imitate a cross. They can name what's been drawn. They cannot draw stick figures, but they may make a circle with facial features. Language, they have a vocabulary of approximately 900 words. They use primarily telegraphic speech. They use complete sentences of 3 to 4 words. They talk incessantly, regardless of whether or not anybody is paying attention. They can repeat sentences of 6 syllables, and they may ask many, many questions. And they're beginning to sing songs. Socialization, here, they can dress themselves almost completely except they'll need help with back buttons and they'll need to be told which shoe is on the right or the left. They can have an increased attention span. They should be able to feed themselves completely. They can prepare simple meals like preparing a bowl of cold cereal and pouring the milk. They can help set the table. They can dry dishes without breaking any. They may have some fears, especially of going to bed because they're a little bit afraid of the dark. They do know the sex of themselves and others. Play here is parallel and starting to be associative. They're beginning to learn simple games, but they often follow their own rules, and they're beginning to start to share. Cognition, they're in that preconceptual phase, so they are in that egocentric thought process and behavior. They're beginning to have some understanding of time, and they might use some time-oriented expressions. They'll talk about the past and the future as much as about the present. They will pretend to tell time. Here they have an improved concept of space as demonstrated in understanding of prepositions and the ability to follow directional commands. And they are beginning to have the ability to view concepts from someone else's perspective. Family relationships, here they're attempting to please their parents and conform to their expectations. They're less jealous of a younger sibling, and this is actually a very good time to have another child if that is in your plan. They are aware of family relationships and sex role functions. Boys tend to identify more with a father or male figure, and they have an increased ability to separate more easily and more comfortably from their parents for short periods of times. At 4 years of age, the growth rate is similar to that of the previous year. Their length at birth is doubled. And here, this is where they have that maximum potential for the development of amblyopia. Gross motor, they can skip and hop on one foot. They can catch a ball reliably. They can throw a ball overhand. They can walk downstairs now using alternate footing. Fine motor, they can use scissors successfully to cut out pictures following an outline. They typically can lace shoes, but they may not be able to do the tie bow. In drawing, they can copy a square, trace a cross and a diamond, and they will add 3 parts to a stick figure. Language, they have about a 1,500 word vocabulary or more. They can use sentences of 4 to 5 words. Questioning is at its peak. They will tell exaggerated stories. They know simple songs. They might use some profane words if they have older siblings. They do obey 4 prepositional phrases such as under, on top of, besides of, in back of, or in front of. They should be able to name 1 or more colors. They comprehend analogs such as if you make a statement, if ice is cold, fire is, and they should be able to complete the sentence. Socialization, they're very independent, tend to be a little bit more selfish and impatient. They may be aggressive physically as well as verbally. They do take pride in accomplishments. They have mood swings. They'll show off dramatically. They enjoy entertaining others. They tell family tales to others with absolutely no restraint. They do have many fears. Play here is associative. It's not uncommon to have imaginary playmates at this time. And know that sexual exploration and curiosity demonstrated through play, such as being doctor or nurse, is not uncommon also at this time. Cognition, here they are in that intuitive thought. They understand time better, especially in terms of the sequence of daily events. They are not able to conserve matter. They judge everything according to one dimension, such as height, width, or order. They're beginning to be less egocentric and more socially aware. They may count correctly, but they have poor mathematic concept of numbers. They do obey their parents because they have set limits, not really because they understand what is right and what is wrong. Family relationships. They will rebel if parents expect too much of them. They can take aggression and frustrations out on parents or siblings. Do's and don'ts become very important. They may have rivalry with older or younger siblings. They might resent the older siblings' privileges and the younger siblings' invasion of privacy and possession. They may run away from home. Um, Here they are identifying strongly with a parent of the opposite sex. 5 years of age. Here we're now starting to see possibly the eruption of permanent teeth. So the school age years, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's called the year of the loose tooth. So here at 5, we may just have the beginnings of starting to develop some loose teeth. Handedness is typically established by this time, and about 90% of people are right-handed. So let's look at, this is the 5-year-old, by the way, and these are our, we're looking at the gross motor now. And here they skip and hop on alternate feet. They can throw and catch a ball well. They can jump rope. They typically will skate with good balance. They may be able to walk backwards, heel to toe. They can jump from a height of 12 inches and land on their toes. And they can actually balance on alternate feet with their eyes closed. Here's where they can actually completely tie their shoelaces. They can use scissors, simple tools, and pencils very well. In drawing, they can copy a diamond and a triangle, and now they'll add 7 to 9 parts to a stick figure. They may be able to print a few letters, numbers, or words, and they may even be able to write their first name. Language. Here they have about a 2,100 word vocabulary. They use sentences of 6 to 8 words with all parts of speech. They can name coins, 4 or more colors. They can draw or describe drawings of pictures with much comment and enumeration. They should know the days of the week, months, and other time-associated words. They can follow 3 commands in succession. In terms of socialization, they are less rebellious and less quarrelsome than at age 4. They're more settled, they're eager to get down to business, they have fewer fears, they're eager to do things right and to please, they try to live by the rules, they have better manners, they are not ready for concentrated close work or small print because they still have a little bit of farsightedness, and their hand-eye coordination is still a little bit unrefined. Play is associative. They do try to follow the rules, but they will cheat to avoid losing. Cognition. Here they'll begin to question what parents think by comparing them with their friends and other adults. They may notice prejudice and bias in the outside world. They are able to view other person's perspective a little bit more so. They may begin to show understanding of conservation of numbers through counting objects. They are using time-oriented words with more understanding. They are very curious about factual information regarding the world. Family relationships. Here they get along well with their parents. They may seek out the parent more often than at age 4 for reassurance and security. This is especially true when they are entering school. They will start to question their parents' thinking and principles. And this is where they're now strongly identifying with a parent of the same sex, especially boys with their fathers. They enjoy activities such as sports, cooking, and shopping with the parent of the same sex. So let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of pre-operational thought. First, we'll talk about egocentrism, and this is the inability to envision situations from perspectives other than your own. So an example of this is if a person is positioned between the toddler and another child, the toddler who is facing the person will explain that both children can see the middle person's face. The young child is unable to realize that the other person's view of the middle person is a different perspective from their own, which would be the back. So what's the implication for this? You need to avoid moralizing about who something is wrong if it requires an understanding of someone else's feelings or opinion. Telling a child to stop hitting because hitting hurts the other person is often ineffective to the aggressor. It feels good to hit somebody else, and they don't understand how it feels to the other person. So instead, we need to say, hitting is not allowed. Transductive reasoning. This is reasoning from the particular to the particular. An example of this is a child refused to eat a food because something previously eaten did not taste good. Here, you need to accept the child's reasoning and offer the refused food at a different time. Global organization. This is reasoning that changing any one part of the whole changes everything. So an example of this is a child refuses to sleep in his or her room because the location of the bed has changed. Again, accept the child's reasoning using the same bed position or introduce changes slowly. Centration. This is focusing on one aspect rather than considering all possible alternatives. Here, a child refuses to eat a food because of its color, even though its taste and smell is acceptable. Again, we just have to accept the child's reasoning. Animism. This is attributing lifelike qualities to inanimate objects. So here, a child might scold the stairs for making them fall down. Here, you can actually join the child in scolding the chairs. And as nurses, we can try to keep frightening objects out of view until we absolutely need to use them. Irreversibility. This is the inability to undo or reverse the actions initially physically started. So when you tell somebody to stop doing something, the child is unable to think of a positive activity. So this is why, what's the implication? You want to tell the child what you want them to do. So state requests or instructions positively. Tell them to be quiet or put the book down versus don't touch the book. Magical thinking, believing that thoughts are all powerful and cause events. So an example of here is, let's say a child unfortunately wishes somebody died and then the person dies. The child feels at fault because of the bad thought that made the death happen. Calling children bad because they did something wrong also makes them feel like they are bad. Clarify that thoughts do not make things happen and that a child is not responsible for whatever occurred. You want to use I messages rather than you messages to communicate thoughts, feelings, expectations. You want to make sure that they have a good understanding that we are not blaming them or criticizing them. Emphasize that the act, not the child, is what is unacceptable. Inability to conserve. This is the inability to understand the idea that mass can change in size, shape, or volume or length without losing or adding to the original mass. So here, if two lines are equal in length and are presented in such a way so one appears longer than the other, the child will actually state the line that looks longer as it is longer, even though when you measure it, they have the same length. So how can we use this? An example of this is giving a child medication in a small medicine cup rather than a large cup, because the child will imagine that the large cup has more liquid in it. If the child refuses the medication in the small cup because they say it's so full, then you can actually pour it into a very large cup because the liquid will appear to be less in a taller, wider container. So even though we as adults know it's the same amount, they don't see that. The ability to conserve begins more in the school-age child. You can also give a large flat cookie rather than a thick small cookie. And here you can also do this with meat or cheese and the child will usually eat the larger size of a favorite food and a smaller size of the less favorite food. So let's talk a little bit about injury prevention during early childhood. And remember, these developmental abilities that are occurring during early childhood um, often increase the risks of the wide variety of injuries that can occur. So what are some of the risks, the activities that contribute to the risks? So now they're walking, running, climbing, they can open doors and gates, they can ride a tricycle, they can throw a ball and other objects. So injury prevention, motor vehicles, please, please, please always make sure they are in the proper car seat and make sure they are sitting in the back seat. You want to supervise a child at all times while playing outside. Don't let them play on curbs or behind parked cars. Don't let them play in piles of leaves, snow, or large cardboard containers in traffic areas because they could get run over. You want to supervise tricycle riding. Lock fences and doors if they're not being directly supervised. Teach them how to cross the street and other pedestrian rules. Obey all traffic regulations. Stand back from the curb until it's time to cross. You want to look left, right, and left again, and then even check for turning cars before crossing the street. Make sure they use the sidewalks. When there's no sidewalk, you want to walk on the left side facing traffic so you can see the cars coming. Wear light-colored clothing at night and attach fluorescent materials to clothing. Uh, Other injuries we need to think about. Um, Here they have great curiosity. They are helpless in water. They're not very aware of danger. So injury prevention um, in terms of drowning, make sure that they are supervised closely when near any sources of water. This is including buckets, infant pools, anything at all. You want to keep bathroom doors closed with the lid on the toilet down. They even have safety doorknobs so the child cannot get in. Um, you want to have a fence around swimming pools and a locked gate. You want to teach swimming and water safety. Other risks related to injury, here now they're able to reach heights by climbing, stretching, and standing on toes. They may pull things. They can open drawers and closets. So burns, uh, here you want to make sure that you've turned the pot handles towards the back of the stove and even using the back burners. Place electrical appliances such as coffee makers and popcorn machines towards the back of the counter, using guardrails in front of radiators, fireplaces, or anything else that gets hot. Store matches and cigarette lighters in locked, inaccessible areas. Place burning candles, incense, anything that's super hot or cigarettes out of reach. Don't let the tablecloth hang within a child's reach because we don't want them to pull it down and then have hot food fall on them. Don't let electrical cords from irons or other appliances hang within the child's reach. Covering electrical outlets with protective plastic caps. Keeping electrical wires hidden or out of reach. Don't let children play with electrical appliances. Really stress the danger of open flames or anything that is hot, and teaching a child what hot means and that hot is dangerous and that they can get hurt. You want to check the bath water prior to placing a child in the bath water. And keeping your water heater at 120 degrees also can be beneficial in terms of preventing scalding injuries. Don't allow children to play with the water faucets. And a little bit different in terms of burns, but it's still a burn nonetheless, is sunburns. So please make sure that you're applying sunscreen liberally and frequently, usually every hour to hour and a half when the child is outside when they are exposed to sunlight. So risk related injury activities. Here they can explore by putting objects in their mouth. Again, opening drawers, closets, and containers. Of course, they can't read labels. They don't know what medications are safe or an amount is safe. So poisoning, here you really want to place all toxic agents truly not just out of reach, but in a locked cabinet because kids can climb and they may be able to get something that is out of reach. Cautioning against eating non-edible items such as plants, because remember, plants, some of them are toxic. Replacing medications or poisons immediately, and make sure that they have child guard caps that are in use and they're being used properly. Make sure that medications are always given as medications. Do not say a medication is candy. Don't store large surpluses of toxic agents. Again, keep them locked. Properly discard empty poisonous containers. Please don't ever reuse them to store food or other poisons. You want to keep toxic agents in their same container. Teaching kids not to play in trash containers, and don't remove labels from containers of toxic substances. They have crucial information on them regarding if a child was to ingest them or to get them on their skin and what needs to be done. Again, please make sure you know the Poison Control Center number or a number that is appropriate to get care in case your child is poisoned. Next, uh, children, they're able to open doors and windows, they're able to go up and down stairs, and their depth perception is not great. So why is this a concern? Falls. So you want to keep screens in the windows nailed securely and use a guardrail. Remember, window screens are intended to keep bugs out. They don't keep children in. So it's also a really good idea not to have cribs or beds under the windows. You want to place gates at the top and bottom of stairs. You want to keep doors locked or use child-proof doorknob covers at entryways to the stairs or a high porch or other elevated areas. We want to remove unsecured or scatter rugs because they can fall. You want to use non-skid decals in the bathtub or tub. Place crib rails fully raised and the mattress at its lowest level. Place carpeting under the crib and in the bathroom. That helps to prevent falls in the bathroom. And if they do fall out of the crib, hopefully they don't, at least they fall into something soft. Keep large toys and bumper pads out of cribs and playpens because then kids can climb on top of these and then climb out. You want to move the child into a youth bed once they're able to climb out of the bed. Again, dress them in safe clothing. We don't want their pants to be too long or their shoelaces to be untied and then they can fall. You want to restrain children in vehicles as always, but also in shopping carts. Please don't ever leave them unattended in a shopping cart, and many shopping carts have like seat belts in them. If they don't have seat belts in them, they do sell in the stores these little inserts that you can attach to the cart and then secure the child inside of it. The child is playing at the playground. Again, they should always be constantly supervised and play on the age appropriate equipment, and there should be soft ground cover. Next, kids will put things in their mouth and they may actually swallow things that are not edible, and this can increase issues with choking. So here you want to avoid large round chunks of meat. So if you are giving a child a hot dog, please you want to cut the hot dog lengthwise and then do a 1/4 degree turn and cut it lengthwise again. And then you're going to have these irregular triangular shaped pieces, and that's much safer. You want to avoid food with pits, bones, dried beans, hard candies, chewing gum, nuts, popcorn, grapes, and marshmallows, because all of these are foods that are at increased risk for choking. You want to use large, sturdy toys that don't have sharp edges or removable parts. Again, we don't want them to be injured by the sharp edges or take the small parts off and choke. Um, if you have any kind of old appliances, really you want to remove the doors. Um, you want to keep the garage door transmitter in a place where they cannot get to it. You want to keep safe toy boxes or chests um, in place. You don't want to use something that is so heavy that if the lid falls on the child, it will lock and then they can't get out. Um, Venetian blind cords really need to be kept out of the reach of children. Again, cribs and beds should not be anywhere near those because those can cause issues with strangulation. And then children's clothes, they pretty much don't come with drawstrings anymore. But if you were to go to a garage sale or something like that, please do not buy clothing that has any kind of drawstrings. Again, risk for strangulation. They are very clumsy still in many things. They can be distracted, and they're often just not aware of the potential dangers that are around them. So things we need to be careful of, again, avoiding bodily damage by not allowing them to play with sharp objects. And of course, they should never be running with scissors or anything like that. They also should not be allowed to eat popsicles or lollipops with sticks in them um, while they are walking. They're more than welcome to have a popsicle, but they need to be sitting down while they're eating it. Um, they need to be taught as they're getting a little bit older, if they are carrying scissors, to please make sure that they are carrying it with the end pointed away from their body. Storing dangerous tools and garden equipment as well as firearms all in locked cabinets. Um, Making sure that we supervise them around animals and any kind of household pets. Um, Using safety glass and decals on large glass areas such as sliding glass doors. That way they can see that the door is closed and they won't walk through it. It is important to teach the child their name, address, and phone number, and who is it appropriate to ask for help. So the cashier in the store, a security guard in the store, the policeman. If they get lost, it's also a really good idea to have identification sewn into their clothing. So uh, in a previous lecture, we talked about don't put their names on the outside of their clothes, but it is okay to have a little label inside of their clothes that has their name and their telephone number. You want to teach them stranger safety. I just mentioned avoid personalized clothing in public spaces, not to go with strangers, telling the parents if anybody makes them feel uncomfortable, always listening to a child's concern regarding others' behaviors, teaching a child to say no when they're confronted with an uncomfortable situation. And just kind of a little FYI, and we'll talk about this again when we talk about musculoskeletal. Um, it is important to be aware that trauma to the epiphyseal cartilage plate can cause growth problems in that bone because that is where the growth of the bone originates. So we're going to change our tune a little bit and let's talk a little bit about play during toddlerhood. So what kinds of things will help our toddler? Uh, and what kinds of things are they going to enjoy doing developmentally? So physical development, suggested activities, you want to provide space in which they can have lots of physical activity. Sandboxes, swings, scale down playground equipment, things that promote social development, having things like replicas of adult tools and equipment for imitative play, letting the child, quote, help with adult tasks, encourage imitative play, provide toys and activities that allow for expression of feelings, um, let them help to maybe wash the dishes, help them, allow them to play with pots and pans, um, mental development and creativity, allowing them for water play, encouraging them to build, draw, and color. You want to provide various textures and objects for play, allowing them, giving them safe boxes that they can play with, um, reading stories that are age appropriate, um, TV monitoring, really nothing until 2 years of age. And if they're going to be watching anything, it should be age appropriate, and no more than 2 hours of age appropriate TV a day or screen time. It is much better to allow them to do other kinds of imaginative play. Um, Social development, things like music and record playing, um, things like a pail and shovel. I'm sorry, that's actually your mental development and creativity. Uh, Other things, let me go back to mental development and creativity. I skipped quite a few things there. So reading stories, push-pull toys, rocking horses, balls, blocks. This is where you have the pail and shovel and Play-Doh. Social development, this is where you're going to have music, record players, um, things like a toy telephone. They can have stuffed animals and dolls and puppets. Um, Again, things with mental development and creativity. Again, we could have things like wooden puzzles, cloth pictures, paper, finger paints, and things of that nature. Um, Next, let's take a look at play during our preschool years. And here we've got physical development, things like space for them to run, jump, and climb. You can teach them to swim, always with supervision. Simple sports and activities, social development. This is, interaction with neighborhood children, enrolling in preschool, mental development and creativity. Here are things you could have them, again, reading stories, going to cultural events that are appropriate to the child's age, going to like the beach, oceans, the zoos, again, monitor TV, again, not so much TV. Um, they can have an adjustable swing, tricycles, a wading pool, again with supervision, um, things that, again, that do help with the social development, dolls, stuffed toys, dishes, trucks, cars, trains, play clothes for dress up, doctor and nurse kits, makeup or shaving kits. And then again, the mental and development and creativity, books, jigsaw puzzles. They can have picture games, blunt scissors, so not scissors that can like chop your finger off, the very blunt ones, paper, glue, crayons, wooden and plastic construction sets. Uh, so just know, in order to gain a sense of initiative, preschools, they do need to have exposure to a wide variety of play materials. We want them to learn as much about how things work as possible. Parents should be urged to provide play materials that encourage creative play, and any kind of free form play is definitely beneficial. So we're talking about play, but now we're going to talk about imaginary playmates. So this usually occurs between roughly 2.5 to 3 years of age and disappears usually when they start school. The purpose of an imaginary playmate is for companionship. They often will be able to do what the child is trying to do. The experience with the child may want to remember or forget. They may be used to blame, that way the child can blame their imaginary playmate, and so then they won't get punished. In this instance, it's important to tell the child that you are the only one that they see, and therefore they are responsible for what happened. Let parents know that this is completely normal. Okay. Uh, Something else that we need to think about for our toddler and preschooler is toilet training. So there are some guidelines that we want to look at to see, Is the child ready for toilet training? So there's a few things that we're going to want to look at. Physical readiness. Do they have voluntary control of their sphincters? Typically, this occurs between 18 and 24 months of age. Do they have the ability to stay dry for 2 hours? Are you noticing a decreased number of wet diapers? And are they waking up dry from naps? Are they having regular bowel movements? Do they possess the gross motor skills of sitting, walking, and squatting, and the fine motor skills to remove their clothing? If they have all of these, then physically they are ready. Mental readiness. Can they recognize that need to poop or pee? If yes, then they're ready. Do they have the ability to verbally or non-verbally communicate when they need to use the restroom? Can they let you know when they are wet? Um, and if they are able to tell you or let you know in their own way that they're wet or they need to use the restroom, that's also indicating readiness. And then do they have the cognitive skills to imitate appropriate behavior and follow the directions? Psychological readiness. This is where they want to please their parents. Are they able to sit on a toilet? And this, by the way, doesn't have to be an adult toilet. It can be the infant seats. Sometimes kids will be much more comfortable on those because they don't feel like they're going to fall in. Um, anyway, so can they sit on those for 5 to 10 minutes without fussing or getting off? Um, are they curious about adults or older siblings' toileting habits? Are they impatient with soiled or wet diapers? Do they have a desire to be changed immediately? So if the youngster is running to a parent with a poopy diaper in their hand to give to their parent, they're saying, please toilet train me. The parents also need to be ready as well. So they need to be able to recognize the child's level of readiness. They need to be able to invest the time required for toilet training. And then toilet training should occur when there is no family stress. So divorce, moving, new sibling, or vacations, that's not the time to toilet train. You want to toilet train when there is no stress going on in the household. Okay, so dental care. We want to begin to encourage good dental habits. We want to brush their teeth with parental supervision. Parents should floss their children's teeth. The first dental visit should actually occur around 6 months of age, just checking everything out. And definitely, they should have a main provider by 1 year of age. They need to have supplemental fluoride beginning at 6 months of age if necessary. So if they have an adequate amount of fluoride in their city water or if they're drinking fluoridated water, then that may not be necessary. So definitely you want to speak to the dentist about this. They can brush early with child toothpaste, and you just want to put a teeny little bit on it initially. You may just be putting, like, just smearing some on the toothbrush, and as they understand to spit the toothpaste out, then you can put a little bit more. So know that it's not uncommon for a toddler to demonstrate lordosis, which is sway back and bow leg. And they have a relatively large head and protuberant belly. So that's something that we're going to see in our toddler, and know that that is normal. So let's talk about some toddler preschooler behaviors that we will see, and how can we teach parents to cope with some of these behaviors. So sibling rivalry. This is that natural jealousy and resentment to a new baby in the family. Toddlers don't really like the changes due to the infant because, again, they're very ritualistic and they have disrupted the rituals and the routines in the family. Um, they don't dislike the baby, although they might say so. So interventions, what can we do? You want to prepare the child for the new infant before the baby is born, where the mother starts to show. Don't let the child be left out. Show with the doll the activities an infant will require in diapering and feeding. Don't say that you're going to have a playmate because that's really not realistic once the baby comes home. Later, yes, but immediately, no. You want to take this opportunity to introduce basic aspects of reproduction and sexuality. You want to let the child feel the fetus move. Ask visitors to remember the child also when visiting if they're bringing a gift. It's not uncommon for the child to regress. Ignore regressive behaviors and then praise age-appropriate behaviors. Preschoolers may act out at preschool because they don't want to tell the parents how they feel. Just for safety's sake, you should never, ever, ever leave infants with small children alone without adult supervision. You don't want an accident to happen. Temper tantrums. As toddlers strive for autonomy, they are confronted with many obstacles. They get frustrated, and basically their temper tantrum is they explode. The child might scream, kick, lie on the floor and kick, bang their head. Obviously, want to keep their head safe. They might hold their breath and faint. Um, Although that is bothersome to the parent, don't worry. The child is going to regain consciousness. They're going to breathe, and they're going to be fine. In general, this is not harmful to the child. Generally, we tell parents, ignore the behavior unless it's harmful to the child. This is extinction. If you don't give them the attention, they will eventually stop. You want to reward the child for post tantrum behavior that is appropriate. You want to try to minimize misbehavior with timeouts. Set realistic expectations. If a child throws a tantrum and won't get into the car, wait a moment. If they don't stop, something, you just pick them up and put them into the car. Negativism. So this is another thing that we're going to see in your toddlers. This is their method of asserting control. So they often are going to say no to everything. So here, what you want to do is don't give them the option to say no. Give them the option between two choices. So things like bedtime is after the story. Okay. You can do things like put your shoes on. I bet I can put my shoes on faster than yours, and make things a game. And of course, even though we all know the adult can put their shoes on faster, let the kid win. That way it makes it a lot more fun for them, and they're going to do what you want. Dawdling, this is just a fancy way of saying procrastination or wasting time. And this is very normal behavior. You're going to ask them to do something, and they might do it very slowly, or they're doing other things beforehand. And yes, this can be very frustrating. And sometimes you just need to regain their attention and let them know what it is you want them to do exactly at that moment in time. Ritualism. Here they want their own way, and truly they are upset if the rituals are disrupted. They have a difficult time coping with their disrupted routines. So when a child is in the hospital, you want to try to find out what the family routines are and if you can implement those into the hospital. Often this is where that family-centered care is important, and having the parents do those routines can help to make things a lot less stressful. So let's talk a little bit about the fears for toddlers. So separation anxiety, they do have that fear from being separated from parents. We tell them, please do not sneak out. You want to tell them right before they're leaving. They can leave an article of the parent's clothing or a voice on some type of a recording device. Initially, they may have stranger anxiety. So you want to talk to the parent first, ignore the child, talk to the parent and see how everything's going, and then maybe even get a puppet or a doll and talk to the doll, and then talk to the doll talking to the child. That can actually really helps the child decrease that stranger anxiety when you're trying to provide care. They can have many general fears of animals or loud noises. I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Anytime you're going to do an uncomfortable treatment, you want to do that in a treatment room. Please maintain the bed as a safe space. Toddlers cope by regressing, so they may retreat to a decreased level of behavior. So know that you can have a child that was potty trained and now they're wetting the bed. You want parents to praise appropriate behavior and then ignore that regressive behavior. Fears for preschoolers. Here's where you're going to see the most number and a very wide variety of real and imagined fears. They have animism, so they're giving lifelike qualities to inanimate objects. They have a fear of annihilation. They have fear of a loss of body parts and body mutilation. So for these kids, Band-Aids are important for body integrity. They also pick up their parental fears, and these are fears that are long-lasting and very difficult to get rid of. So let the child have a dim light on so that they can see there are no monsters in their room. You can desensitize by exposing the child to a fear in a safe environment. And then allow them to observe other children engaging in the feared activity. This way they can see that that child is experiencing the feared activity and no harm is coming to them. Masturbation. Toddlers may manually stimulate themselves or do posturing like tightening their thighs. Parents need to be accepting versus critical. They also need to show that this is not appropriate in a public place and teach them that this is something that occurs in privacy. If parents refer to the genitals as dirty, then the child may think of sexual functioning later on life as dirty, and we don't want to do that. Sex roles are differentiated and very evident in imitative play. Preschoolers, again, masturbation is more pronounced at age 4. Again, we do emphasize that it is a private act. They are very conscious of sexual typing. They will say, this is what boys girl and this is what girls do. This is stuff that they see in society all the time. It's very common for them to like to dress like their same-sex parents. They might say, boys don't play with dolls, or girls don't play with trucks. In terms of sex education, this age group is curious about the opposite sex. They may play doctor, and if you see this, we tell people, don't freak out. We recompose the children, and we tell the kids to ask their parents what it is that they want to know. And actually, the parents will ask the kids what it is that they want to know, and we engage them in a different activity. They may ask where babies come from. Again, asking the parents, the child, exactly what it is that they want to know. You want to be very simple and honest. They don't need lots of nitty-gritty information. And when they want more information, they will ask for it, or you can just give it to them. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about speech disfluency. This is that stuttering and stammering. And this is a normal part of speech development between the ages of 2 and 4 years of age. So we don't want parents to focus on this or stress out about it. When they do that, when they focus on it, that can actually increase the problem. Know that if stuttering continues, an evaluation should be made by the age of 5. There is a tool, it's called the Denver Articulation Screening Exam, and this is an excellent tool for assessing articulation skills of a child and for explaining to parents the expected progression of sounds. Nutrition. So age 2 and under, really we want them to have normal fat foods. Do not give them low fat or skim milk due to the protein and the low calorie content. They should not have more than 4 ounces of juice for the 1 to 3 year old, and then no more than 4 to 6 ounces of juice for 4 to 6 year olds. That is in your textbook. I'm here to say kids don't need juice. Give them water. Juice is just sugar water. So you're better off just giving them plain water. And if you don't give them juice, they're never going to want that sweetness. It's not good for their teeth, and it's just empty sugar calories. Anyways, toddlers at about 18 months of age have a decreased appetite due to slower growth and a decreased nutritional needs because of, they basically have something called physiologic anorexia, and that's because they're just not growing as fast. At about 2 to 3 years of age, they will do something called grazing. So you're going to want to be giving them lots of finger foods. It's very hard for them to sit still. So you want to just give them nutritious finger foods. So they're going to be nibbling a lot, lots of snacking. You don't want to overwhelm a child with too much food on their plate. For each year, give about a tablespoon of solid foods of vegetables, rice. Give about 1/3 to 1/4 of an adult size for like milk, bread, fruits. Because of ritualism and autonomy, they may want to eat with certain dishes and silverware constantly. They may also want the same food multiple days in a row and refuse to eat anything else. This is called a food jag. Note that they might eat the same food 3 days in a row, and then a few days later, they say, I hate that food. So don't be surprised by that. Although this does not give a well-balanced diet, attempts to change it is extremely difficult. So what you're going to do is you'll give them those foods, and then you will offer other foods as well. Next, we're going to talk about sleep disturbances. Note that for toddlers, problems related to separation anxiety is where we're going to see some sleep disturbances, and ways to rectify that is to have a bedtime ritual, a typical time. Is there a little snack beforehand? Quiet activity an hour or so beforehand, maybe taking their little bath, giving them their favorite toy. Having that routine is very, very important. Next, we're going to talk about preschoolers and nightmares versus sleep terrors. Okay, and know that this again is not something that is uncommon to see in preschoolers. They are very bothersome to the parent, the sleep terrors, but they're not bothersome to the child. So let's do a compare and contrast of nightmares versus sleep terrors. So nightmare, basically this is a scary dream. We've all had them. They take place with usually during REM sleep, and it's followed by fully awakening. A sleep terror, this is actually a partial arousal from deep sleep, which is the stage 4 non-REM, non-dreaming sleep. Time of distress. The nightmare is basically after the dream is over, the child wakes up, they're crying or calling out. It's not usually during the nightmare itself, it's once they wake up. The sleep terror, during the terror itself, the child will scream and thrash, and afterwards is calm. They're not aware of the screaming or thrashing. Timing of occurrence, the nightmare is usually the second half of the night. The sleep terror is usually the first 1 to 4 hours after falling asleep. The child's behavior, you'll have crying in your younger children. They're going to be scared, and they're going to even be fearful after they've, when they've woken up and they come to tell you that they've had a nightmare. For the sleep terror, initially the child might sit up, they might thrash, they might run about, they might scream, moan, they might look like they're frightened or confused. But once the child wakes up, if they actually wake up, because they don't always wake up, all of this stops. Responsiveness to others. In the nightmare, the child is very happy to be with other people. They are reassured by others' presence, and they, quite frankly, want to have their parents' comfort. The child with sleep terrors, they're not aware of another's presence. Someone else being present doesn't comfort them. They may actually push them away, and they may actually thrash about if you try to restrain them. So return to sleep. Well, the child that has the nightmare, they might have a difficult time going back to sleep, right? Because they're scared. The child with a sleep terror, they go to bed quite rapidly. And again, if they may not have even woken up, they may just stop. And it's often very difficult to keep them awake. Description of the dream. So the nightmare child, well, obviously they had a dream. If they have the vocabulary to describe what happened, then yes. The sleep terror child, remember, there was no dream, so there is no memory of anything that occurred. Intervention. So here, with the child that had the nightmare, you're going to want to accept the dream as real. You want to sit with the child, offer them comfort and reassurance, let them know that you're there to protect them. You might want to lie down with the child. Um, Often they say they don't take the child to your bed, but know that obviously at some point everybody's got to get to sleep. But know that you want to let them know it's a special occasion, that this is not something that is typically that's going to happen. And if the child is having recurrent nightmares, then you may need to get professional counseling. The child with sleep terrors. Here you want to observe the child for a few minutes. Don't interfere. You just kind of want to, it's more of a watch, wait, and see. You want to intervene only if the child might get hurt. You can just very gently guide them back to bed if they got out of bed. You want to stress to parents that sleep terrors are very normal. They're common in preschoolers, and usually they require very little intervention. There is some research that shows that sleep apnea may precipitate sleep terrors, so therefore a sleep study may be necessary in certain cases if this is something that is very consistent and persistent. Thank you very much. This concludes the information regarding the toddler and the preschooler. Please be sure to watch the other presentations that are due this week.